All right, here we are. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to talk like Zoe Deschanel today. You're watching 2-on-1, the internet's top sensation, where adorably we address pop culture topics. I am your host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm your other host, Reverend Stephanie Kendall, and that was a really intense Zoe.
It was, well, it's more Kermit the Frog and Louis Armstrong, but she does do that sometimes. Doop doop doo doo doo. So I don't know. It's probably a lower nasal thing. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. I went with the big Zoe hair. There's that running trope. We're doing New Girl today. If you have not caught on to that, post resurrection, you need new things. So why not dive into New Girl? There's an ongoing trope in which Jess pretends like she can't hear people because she has such big hair. Well, particularly she can't hear Nick, and she can definitely hear him, but he's like, she has so much hair, she can't hear you. And so this is my big hair to if I just don't like a question or just want to ignore someone today, I'm just gonna be like, I can't hear you, I have too much hair happening.
I love it. I always love the excuse and chance of being ignored. I actually have, like, I think substantial hearing loss where sometimes my partner will say things to me and I literally do not hear him. And I hate to say it, but sometimes my child says things to me and I just ignore her, claiming that I didn't hear her.
You should grow your hair back out and just like use it as earmuffs, like adult earmuffs.
I just got my hair cut and there's so much
more. It looks good. I was gonna say
so much more gray in it. Which
we getting older.
But that's okay. Speaking of getting older, I've decided that I'm going to turn the clock forward and say that Jeff Wonder Designs is now celebrating 18 years of is it 17 making ordinary?
I think it's still 16, and I think we give him a year like every 3 months, but I'm into it.
Is it every time we worry about Advent? Because it'd be like 85 years now. Okay, then our program today is brought to you by Jeff Wonder Designs, celebrating 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary through the creation and disbursement of liturgical textiles, including frontals, stoles, paraments, banners, albs, chasubles, and of course copes. But hey, you just had Easter this past Sunday, and to our Orthodox friends, happy Easter in a few days. You need stoles and you need paraments and you need banners and you need art that celebrates Christ's resurrection, I assure you. And we commend unto you, Jeff Wonder Designs.
I love to go home at night on a Sunday and actually worship with my friends online. And I was stunned by how many people had such beautiful liturgical textiles from Jeff Wonder on their altars, on their, like everyone had it. And then I also noticed who didn't. I very much noticed who needed an upgrade.
Well,
and I really want to be like, hey.
Or if you don't, or if you need a custom stole, or if you need a stole from a catalog, go to Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW.com. Check out the full catalog, check out customization options. Do it now because we have a special code for you. It's right there at the bottom of it. For those of you listening online, it's 2-on-1. Those are letters. 1-5. Those are numbers. Use that at checkout for 15% off your entire stole order. That means 1 stole or 100 stoles. Please buy 100 stoles using our discount code. 100 stoles. Or just one, because we really do trust it and we love it. And thank you, Jeff, for being our sponsor. All right, let's talk about New Girl. The
Who's that girl?
It's Cara Gilger.
It's Cara Gilger.
Hey,
so good to have you back on 2-on-1.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And it's good to have you. I just sang you in. I was like, who's that girl? And he's like, it's Cara Gilger. Well, here she is. I really wanted to come sliding in with like a nameplate.
Yeah, maybe post-production.
Maybe. I got a broken leg. I'm not sliding anywhere.
Well, not with that attitude. So, Cara, we're so glad that you are here. And I'm double checking because I think 2, 1, 2. It's 4. It's number right? 4. Yeah.
I think so too.
It's not your 5 timers episode yet, but
no, we're gonna save something really special for that.
I mean, we've done great.
I have some proposals I'm going to email y'all.
We've done Great British Baking. We've done Fast and the Furious, which, it means family. My impressions are so good. I don't know why.
They're spot on today.
Okay, so New Girl. Tell us about New Girl. Why do you like it? Why did you pick it? What are we doing with it?
Oh, so actually I think I'm here because I needed something mindless to binge in this season. My brain for work is just on all the time. And so I wanted something that was short because the episodes are like 22 minutes that I could like mini binge in the evening that didn't require much like emotional engagement. So I just decided I would start New Girl and binge it through because I watched it the first time it came out. And I text Stephanie that that's what I was doing. And Stephanie's like, and then a few days later, I called Stephanie and I could hear New Girl in the background. And she was like, oh, I'm binging it now too. So that's kind of how I ended up watching it in this season. Because there are just some seasons of your TV watching life where you want to watch like docu-series, and there are some seasons where you just need fluff. And I had just finished binging all of the like grifter movies and short series.
We love a good grifter movie.
So Inventing Anna.
Yeah.
I had just watched
That's what you need to come. You need to come.
And-
Inventing Anna is what you need to come and talk. Holy
gosh.
smokes.
Yes, I have like so many theories on that. But anyway, so I just finished watching all the grifter docu-series or dramatized series. And so I needed something like much shorter, lighthearted, you know, not about financial ruin and lies.
Well, it's
All the people in the loft are already financially ruined. They're
Nick
old
got that
millennials.
box under the bed.
right. They are elder millennials.
They are. Nick said something about being born in 1981, which is my birth year. And I joke that I'm the grandmother millennial because I'm in that weird, like old millennial.
You're an Oregon
not
Trail
quite.
is what
Huh?
Eric Atkinson described it as, the Oregon Trail generation. It's like 1981 to 1985.
I'm in that little mini generation that either gets lumped in with millennial or gets started as its own. And as a rewatch, I felt like New Girl captures that weird little mini generation really well.
So that
With
actually
like some of the economic anxiety of millennials, but also some like real, like almost Gen Z kind of stuff.
oh, you mean like, well, let's talk about it because it's almost nihilistic.
Well, and
Mhm.
I do
Yeah.
want some. I want to position. So I've been watching this too. This is one of my like 5 shows that I kind of binge yearly. And for whatever
Wow.
reason, it's something that pops up and I just like kind of let it, because again, like you, it can run in the background. And there are certain episodes that I love. There are certain episodes that I loathe, and they remind me like, don't be like that, because I recognize these people. I've lived with or known or gone to school with every single one of them.
Or been.
Or
At
been.
some point. I
Or-
own most of Jessica Day's wardrobe. I am
Yeah.
not ashamed of that.
And I have had my CC years. So not that I was a model, but just Smith was a club in LA kid at one point in her life.
Mhm.
And so, but I do find that I often watch this around Easter because it's a time in which so the show came out in 2011, which is right when I started church. And there's something about Jess's ability to be new, like this new girl. She's established, she's a grown woman, but there's newness here, and I think I subconsciously lean into that for this season of Resurrection, and I don't know why. But Arthur, what's your relationship to New Girl?
I had never seen it. I was sick for a few days prior to this, and I watched a lot of it, and I enjoyed it. It's sharp, it's jump cutty. I think as an outsider in it, I want to ask I think it'll be good. Started to binge because it's light and easy, started to binge because it speaks to life. So of these great friend ensemble casts, Friends, How I Met Your Mother, I guess The Big Bang Theory, though I'd really love it if we never talked about that show on this show. Yeah. But let's just keep it to Friends and How I Met Your Mother. The Friends are horrible people. How I Met Your Mother.
I was like, you love Friends.
I hate Friends.
I know.
I can't wait
Me
for
neither.
Pierce to come on and just hear me complain about Ross and how they treat Ross. But that's neither here nor there. The Friends are horrible people. The How I Met Your Mother group is a bunch of enablers who are really just bad people ultimately. Like, sorry, but I think we found some deep grace for them with Aaron Dickey a few episodes
did.
ago. But this group, they just seem to be a bunch of mess ups. Like they're all just kind of strange, and they accept each other's brokenness, but they're not like grand schemers who have ruined everything or have contests to see who they can ruin. Like they're just, my question about it is this a fair portrayal of the elder millennial generation? Is this an aspirational kind of show?
Ooh.
Does this show us how we would want to be in relationship with others?
That's a good question, because there's some things like, as shows age, there's like some things that you're like, that still works. And some things that you're like, oh, I've lived more life and like, that doesn't hit the same way.
Mhm.
Like there are some things about New Girl that like feels deeply nostalgic, because like, I think I was the age they were portraying when the show came out, like, cause it was for my generation. And so there was kind of a like resonance, I guess, with the kind of being a little bit older and having to figure it out because of like the economics and really, yeah, economics and education and all the ways that in housing and how that all intersects. But there are some things that for me don't resonate now that I'm like older with where our generation has aged and how we have become.
So would this show have been possible after 2016? And would this show be possible now after 2020?
It ran through 2018, just for what it's worth.
No, I know, but would it have been able to have started in 2016 is the real question. Or I guess 2017 might be a clearer thing. I will talk.
That's a really good question, because I was thinking about it in terms of ensemble cast too. So I'm glad you started there. This is a more diverse, I mean, Friends was always a bunch of white people living in New York, which like never was accurate in any way. Very, and a lot of ensemble casts are that way, white people hanging out with white people. This show is a little more diverse, but very cringy in its approach. I don't think they had a diverse, I didn't look it up, but I would seriously doubt that they had a diverse writing team in the room. So I'm not sure if it could be made now, because do we really see very many ensemble, like coming of age shows that do comedy, like being made right now? I don't think that's a thing we're doing.
Well, and I think that there's something to the fact that like, so this came out in 2011, and all of these characters, because it's an ensemble cast, all actually do, they have their trope that they're playing into, and the specific thing that you can name their growing edge right off the bat. Like, exactly who they are and what's happening. Whereas I think post 2017, let's say, there was already such a divide. Like Schmidt's very like that conservative, 2011 conservative,
they have a douchebag jar for him.
They do. They have the douchebag jar for him through all the seasons. I think at one point everyone does put something into it. So it's not that everyone is exempt from those douchebag ways. We just name that one person may need that boundary a little bit more. But there's an episode in which Cece and Jess go to caucus for a candidate, and Schmidt is like not about it, but like engages them both kind of in a weird way. And I don't think that would be possible now. Like those types of episodes in which like things along the political divide line that often were cringier moments, but also had some relevancy to it on like how you can talk to your friends and neighbors and colleagues about, things that are challenging for you. I don't know that we're in that space today in a way that we can go and be heard.
So part of the comedic divide, I'm not as well versed as you all in these kind of things, but part of the comedic device I think is cringiness, because like I think Stephanie, you said when we were talking about this earlier that like some of it doesn't age well. It wasn't like I was watching it in 2011 and not cringing.
Sure.
The cringe factor is part of what they're trying to drive at. Mm-hmm. I just don't think we cringe at the same things anymore or give passes to what's funny. Like I think comedy is fundamentally changing. I think what we as a culture deem as funny and who we're allowed to punch down on is different.
Well, and it's punching down, and that's the whole thing. Punching up or punching down isn't comedy. Punching down is just fascism in a funny tone. It's satire has to. This show is not satirical. The show's weird, and technically it falls into the surrealist camp because it's overtly going cringy. So there's like this like layer of irony baked into the entire character of the show.
Did you watch the episode where the young kids move in the apartment across from them?
I didn't know.
Okay. So there's an episode where they get a knock on the door and there's new neighbors, and I would consider them like young millennials. And Schmidt wants to be their besties so bad, and he is so embarrassing and obnoxious. And Jess ends up fitting in because she's struggling. But in the end, she's like, no, I still do my own laundry, and I still do I still know how to like call the landlord to fix things, and I can use a dishwasher. I mean, that was one of the jokes, is that the kids didn't know how to use a dishwasher. It scared them. And I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, okay. So what is cringe in the congregational church? And I don't just mean congregational tradition. I mean, what is cringe in congregations? How do we do it?
Cara?
Well, no, I will.
Like how we use it as a device in like leadership and how we talk about ourselves.
Yep. How do we awarely, how do we with self-awareness participate in the level of cringe? So I'm going to answer my own question first.
Okay, because I think I have one, but I want to hear your example first.
At the church I used to serve in Dallas, there was always this level of like campiness kind of to what we did in a lot of ways. And the campiness was inherent, and the campiness was unavoidable. I can't go into specifics because I won't, but it's meta. And that's all cringe is meta, is trying to do something that's going to make people be like, and you have to know the people well enough and what would cause it to do it. I think congregations, when they have their own identity, it becomes niche, and it's supposed to be niche. And therefore that's what allows the cringe to happen. New Girl wasn't a popular show, but it was popular with its audience, if that makes sense. New Girl wasn't watched by baby boomers. It was watched by elder millennials who were just starting to be like actual grown-ups in their late 20s, which is 10 years later than everywhere else. But God, Xers haven't started to be grown-ups in their 50s. Love you, Xers. Yeah, I'm killing it today. I'm sick. Leave me alone.
No, you're doing great. I think I think if I can hop into a little bit of this, please. I think I see cringe happen most often when we hold tight to tradition for tradition's sake and not lean into the growing edges that we know are there. Like when we've already named like God is so expansive, all are welcome, and then you do something that's like, but not you. You know what I mean? And you lean into the hypocrisy that you've already named, and like we all do it. And for me, that's where I find the most cringe moments still manifesting in church, is when we've had these full conversations about the expansiveness of God, and and we're there, and then the congregation and or the people just kind of revolt or kind of lean back into habits just because of comfort, I guess. But I don't know. I find that to be the most cringy. I don't know. Cara, what about you?
I think it's habit. I think for me, it's when we take ourselves too seriously to be self-critical or even like laugh at the absurdity of this endeavor. We're not aiming, this is not a project in perfection. But there are things that are just absurd. And sometimes like we take ourselves so seriously, we won't name like how silly or how absurd or how ridiculous we're being, or a situation is. Like, there's just like, sometimes our project is so serious that it lacks levity. And I think that creates cringe.
Yeah, 1000%.
Like I think about church buildings actually a lot when I think about cringe. Like a lot of our buildings are a little old and we need to do some updates. And some people are like really faithfully doing that. But sometimes we're not willing to like be self-critical and even have like a sense of humor about that part of our common life.
A painted a portrait or a mural 10 years ago, and it was kind of gaudy then, but now it's definitely gaudy today. But we can't take it down because it's been up for this long. And and this is not here by any means, but we calcify very easily.
Yeah.
And that's what I think causes cringe. I like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted because
I'm sorry.
there are parts.
Did I just mansplain your point to you? I'm so sorry.
You just like restated it for the audience in a way that made me sound really smart, but I'm claiming that it was my idea.
Oh no, it was your idea. So we're on the same page. Part of my interruption, Steph.
No, you're all good. I was at a church once, and because there are parts of New Girl that very much like just are deep in me. Like it influenced like some of the things that I say, some of the things that I do. Every once in a while, I'll just like jump on something and be like parkour, because it's funny, because it's a Schmidtism, and Schmidt as a character kind of like sucks. He's the one I don't like most, and yet I think there's something to Schmidt's being the most faithful to himself and like commitment to growth in the ways that some other characters don't, which
he's
I have
so cringy. You cheer for him when he has an aha moment.
Yes, exactly. In which we'll get to this in a minute because I have a question for you all about this. So Schmidt's got these like quirks and whatever, and like it's really into again like parkour, and he's like kicking things and jumping off things, and I just did that once because actually I do it all the time, so I'm not gonna lie. And literally it was so like the young kids in the congregation watched me as the pastor, and I was like, ooh, parkour, and they were just like, ugh, and they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, you know what, don't worry about it, I'm having fun, like it's okay. So I can kick a step.
But that's an interesting thing there's a distinct difference between the cringe of New Girl and the cringe of, say, The Office. Because it's laughing with versus laughing at. And perhaps is that what we need to cultivate in our cringe is, yep, here's our church with like the grossest white Jesus mural ever in our nursery. And oh my gosh, it looks like he's made of vines, and I'm so sorry. But it's kind of who we are, and I also wish it wasn't. Do we
right
that?
No one in the loft is exempt from cringe.
No.
Like everybody has their moment of just falling short and needing grace. Ooh. And so it's sort of equitable in that way. There's not like an ideal character. I mean, Jess is like really perky, but there are limits to that, and she has conflict in her character.
The douchebag jar, I think, is a testament to the cringiness that happens to all of them. Like that douchebag jar that they all kind of toss into very much is like no one is exempt from. At any given time, you've got Coach, Winston. I think Cece does, you know what I mean? But like at one point they all toss into it.
And they accept it. They don't.
No one's exempt from accountability to the community either.
There it is.
Which I think is a really important dynamic that is unique maybe to that generation and to our generation. As I talk to young pastors and talking about how like they struggle when they have to say to their church, no, you can't talk to me that way. We can't talk to each other that way. That like everyone is part of the system of accountability and how we create community that is safe and caring and not douchey.
Well, and it's also, they never fight it. It's never no, I took my shirt off because I needed to. Or I'm going to move out because y'all want me to put $2 in the douchebag jar. You just put it in and you move on. It's not.
So is the douchebag jar like a liturgy of reconciliation?
The douchebag jar is the act of repentance, because there is a work of restoration that begins in repentance. It does not complete it. The work of restoration, in fact, is from the ongoing work of repentance, that eventually, if you are douchebagged out, you may not make the same mistake over and over again.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Because what is the episode? It's one of the ones in the first season where they open it up and they're like, Schmidt, you have to put $50 in that douchebag jar. Like it's the setup for the episode. And then you roll backwards to figure out what led to Schmidt having to put $50 in.
You know what the episode is? It's Schmidt's
birthday episode. And like, he tries to make a move on Jess at the very end. And the roommates are like, you owe $50. So and like, not all restoration looks or is the same.
So what if,
And hold on, but isn't one of Jess's first times putting in the douchebag jar also when she almost goes to hook up with Schmidt and then they catch her and she's got the box of 100 condoms and Nick is like, oh,
Yeah.
and then she has to put it in the douchebag jar too because it all comes because they're in community together and they're all
It's about violating other people's boundaries, which is why I
Yeah.
think Arthur's point that it's a restitution thing is
Mhm.
important. It's when you have violated the boundaries of another person's humanness that you have to put money in the douchebag jar.
so isn't that interesting that at the center of their community, it is holding holy the humanity of each other and the humanity that they have together. So can we
Mhm.
talk about Coach for a second?
Mhm.
Okay. So for those of you who haven't seen the show, in the pilot, Damon Wayans Jr. plays a character named Coach, who is, again, I think the writers were, I think that's a very fair question, Kara, if the writing room wasn't very white, because the characters of color had the black guy
There are
was
holes.
a stereotypical, in some ways, black guy, like, oh, athletic and whatever. And I'm not going to jump into that, but it felt one-dimensional to begin with. Anyways, Damon Wayans Jr. played Coach. And then his show was picked back up and he did not expect that. So he had to depart. And they didn't recast him. They just wrote in another character who came in and never really felt like it was a strange thing that in episode 2, they're like, oh, wait, this is Marvin.
Winston.
Did I
Winston.
say Marvin?
Yeah. Yeah, it's named Winston Bishop, which then the trope or the there's it's a spoiler show. Schmidt's first name is you also learn as Winston, and that's why it's a whole like he's got to be Schmidt and not Winston. But yeah, Coach got picked up on Happy Endings, and that was a whole thing because Coach was supposed to be, I believe, there was supposed to be a triangled love interest between Jess and Nick and Coach.
Here's what I like. We talk about a limber church and we talk about a flexible church and we talk about a congregation that is able to adapt. So what happens when one of the main pillars of one's community suddenly goes? What happens when, like, what can we learn from New Girl in terms of pivoting? I guess it's already kind of there, right? Like we should.
I think this, okay. So one of my favorite episodes is like the second episode where Jess breaks their TV.
Yes.
And they find out she has all of her stuff at her ex's house and that she happens to have a TV and they're like, we're going to get the TV back. And so I think that's one of my favorite episodes. And it was kind of when I was like, okay, I can watch this nonsense because everyone is essential. I don't know that answers your question, but everybody has a role to play. Everybody has a hat to wear.
Well, and I think so the pivoting, if I can jump onto that, because
yes.
The audience, to be fair, Karen and I have talked about this before. So not in like this type of depth or with this question, but we've talked about this episode before because we both felt very drawn to it in a permissive way of being like, you can buy into the nonsense and like keep going. The pivoting, I think, is most noticeable because that's Winston's first episode, right? I think it's when Winston comes in and he's just come back and he's a childhood friend from Nick's. He does not know Jess. He was not there for the interview process. So the whole show opens up with her saying that she was going home to see her boyfriend Spencer and he was cheating on her. So that's why she needs to move out. And she thought she was applying with a bunch of women because of the way that the way
Schmidt wrote the ad.
Because the way Schmidt wrote the ad.
Deep
and
beiges.
Yeah, it's like it's beautiful, like Southern light and beiges, which I loved. I mean, Schmidt contains multitudes, but so Winston was not there for all of that. Winston just kind of comes in with people he trusts and then by proxy has to trust and lean into the community that they've already kind of built that he's a part of. And I think the way in which we pivot or we can learn about pivoting is so when she goes to get the TV, she also goes to get her other things, which includes a shirt and some hats and all of these things. And all the guys to rally around her put on these crazy hats that she has. Like we're talking like, think Blossom, like from Blossom, That's dating.
Ridiculous hats.
Ridiculous hats. And they all put them on and they all look silly, but it is a stance of solidarity, even though they have just met this woman who they have no real ties to. Winston has just come into this new community as well. And I think the church is hesitant to pivot unless we've established relationship like thoroughly. And what New Girl says that we can do is that it is okay to pivot on a dime when you see the needs, when you see the justice needs, when you see other people struggling, and that pivot that you may do engages faithfully the community you're trying to build and support.
It's the yes and. Amy Poehler talks about the yes and I think.
Wait, who talks about that?
Amy Poehler talks about it in her memoir, the yes and.
Amy Poehler,
but I mean, it's a popular.
Yes.
But I think
it just made my heart go zing.
I think just yes, and in that moment, they agreed that a new covenant has formed with a new roommate, because Wilson is the last person to put on a hat and agree to like defend this random chick that just moved into his loft while he was gone playing basketball. And so I think I don't know the full picture, but I'm going to say yes to this covenant anyways. And I think one of our problems with the church, and like largely and then locally, is that we want every single detail about where power is going to be and where I fit in and how this is going to work before we say yes. And there's no and to that. There's no collaborative imagination or building if your yes only comes when everything has been laid out and you know exactly where you're going. That's not spirit work. Like that's not, the collaborative work of the Holy Spirit with God and with what we do in community. And so for me, I think that yes and kind of moment in that second episode, and then throughout kind of the seasons, is a constant revisiting of the covenant of the loft. Like even like when Jess finds out that Cece is with Schmidt, there's like a redesign of the covenant and the loft around that. And it doesn't take understanding what their Cece and Schmidt's relationship is to get there.
So that's fascinating, because we're defining covenant as relationship, not covenant as law, which I think is a very fair thing to do. I think the step in it too. So Smith, a few weeks ago, I don't know when, at one point you were talking and you said, I think it was when you were out here in Kansas.
Okay.
It can be biblical, but that doesn't make it holy.
Yeah, she put that on Twitter too, not too long ago.
Right. And that now somebody else like put it out there of like slavery is biblical, liberation is biblical, but only one of them is Christ-like. And somebody else was like supersession. Anyways, I think that's the there's plenty to be said about plans and orthodoxally seeking out the next steps and everything else. And sometimes you just have to go on the gut and put yourself between the weak person and the strong person, and stand on the side of the oppressed, which is what I think Winston did, which is what I think they really do for each other. I do want to ask a question about Jess. Is Jess infantilized?
By who and when?
By herself.
Did you, okay, sorry, I hate to play the quiz. Did you watch the episode? But when Nick dates the lawyer, did you watch the one in season 1 where Nick dates the lawyer and she does not like Jess? And Jess has a monologue at the end that's like, I do like glitter and I do teach kids and I like to be, she has this whole thing about who she is. And she's like, and I don't care if you like it. And I think sometimes, yes, she is. And sometimes I think that's just the trope of her character. And I also wonder if there's a bit of maybe we're harder on Jess in that regard. Because she's female, because they all kind of have a Peter Pan syndrome of some sort. Like they're all resisting growing up in some ways. Nick dropped out of law school and wants to be a bartender and refuses to get a bank account. Like that's a thing, Schmidt should probably learn how to socially engage with people in a non-douchey way. And he is resisting that at times. Wilson is learning to find his own voice with his boss and in his career, and sometimes is just more willing to get along, to go along instead of assert himself. And so I feel like in a way, they're all kind of, they kind of capture the stereotype that millennials were like delayed developmentally in terms of our launch into adulthood, which I think 10 years later, we understand the economics that intersected with that. And I also think the show does that well. Like, who has not had a creepy landlord and you have to rely on them to get your stuff fixed? I mean, that is a deeply like, you're renting in your, like, we're the first generation that was like still renting in our 30s and into our 40s. Like, that's a deeply relatable plot, thing that goes all the way through all the seasons.
As I look at my list, it says like call landlord.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I think that there is the one, I mean, to be fair, a good friend of mine's brother is one of the original writers on the show, and he is an older Gen Xer, and like there's 17 years between the two of them as siblings, and so like it's just one of those things. And so I think writing for a group of people his sister's age, you know what I mean? Like, as you look down,
there's some real like
ageism in there that
yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I would, if you want to name it ageism, but I'll name it ageism for the sake of conversation. But the one who I think actually gets infantilized most and who I get just angry about is Winston and what they do to him, who he's a fine character, like a part of the group, and they make him so dumb in the latter seasons, and like they take away everything from him. Like, he just like doesn't even understand like how the world works anymore until he gets Allie, who's his fiance, who's lovely, and like, but even she's like, what has happened to you?
They flanderized him. They took one aspect.
Yeah, they flanderized him for sure.
Yeah.
And the finale, can we talk about the series finale for a second?
And I just don't. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think they do the same, like, I think they do that culturally too, to Cece. Like,
yeah,
I have real, like, there was not an Asian American or an Indian American, like, or Southeast Asian writer in that room. And you can tell by the way that they wrote her character, by the way they wrote her family. Like, season 1, she goes to visit her grandma in a nursing home. And I'm like, but your parents want to arrange, like, you can't just dice up the culture, and some of that stuff doesn't stick well, or doesn't.
Well, it's racist. I mean, like, it just, and that's part
of
uneducated. It's part of the thing in which doesn't. It's one of the things that I think why I still watch it, and it's why I still am like, that's a good reminder to not lean into it, because like, I don't not see myself in some of those really terrible spaces, because we all grow and we try and we do better and we learn and we hold each other accountable. And so it's like, but you can't do that to TV because it's stuck in time. And so
go ahead.
No. And so it's just like this, it's racist, and we can say that now. And I think I watched it and I was like, that seems not right, but I didn't maybe have the language for it. And so it's like, I think that's why it's one of those things where it's like, for me, it becomes like, as I watch it and more things get cringy, it also is a reminder that like I'm growing, like, because there was a space in my life in which I watched it and I was like, oh, this was really meaningful. And I think that has to tell the church, there are things in which can be really meaningful for you from when you were a kid or when you were a teen or whatever, whenever you came to church. It doesn't always have to stay meaningful to you, or the meaning can change.
Yeah. Arthur, I think I derailed where you
wanted.
No,
you didn't.
Would you like to pull us back on track?
No, there's no track. And this was a very good point in it. And I think a new question emerged too, which is, what is the difference between cringe that is part of the character and cringe that is an excisable part of the character? That is, what does it mean to listen to sermons from 12 years ago? I have my Bible that I've kept notes in now since 2007 when I bought it in honor of going to seminary. I've recovered it, which is kind of neat. And now I cross out notes I wrote in the Psalms because, oh my God, Arthur, in 2009, you did not have a very good Christology. That was not super sessionist. Okay. And now there's all these little smoke curlicues. How do we address that? And then with the finale, Winston pranks them by making them think they are evicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so they leave the loft. Like it's just down to Nick and Jess at this point, but they pack up and they leave. And then at the end, Winston's like, hey, surprise, I pranked you. Burr, burr, burr. I don't understand how pranks work.
Well, that's a running joke. So that's a running joke from season 1 that it's season 2 where they do the whole episode about how, and it's like a recurring thing where Winston either goes too soft or too hard on pranks. And then the episode where Nick pranks are a part of the season throughout, but
it starts
really
at Cece's first wedding, right? Doesn't it? I think it starts at Cece's first wedding in which the badger gets.
Do you remember when Nick cuts out the bottom of tries to convince Schmidt he's aging?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Like puts in placebos for his like Mucinex or whatever, or not Mucinex, but his he makes him like constipated and cuts the chair out so he sinks in it
and is in such debt, but then will plaster the whole wall with his growth marks to make Schmidt think he's shrinking.
Yes. And alters his pants to sit up high and low, and switches them at the dry cleaner. So there is this history of prank. Okay. But I also think for the season finale to end that way, that there's a certain amount of gullibleness that runs counter to everyone's. I don't know. It just
there's a certain amount of. Yeah, I don't know, Arthur, where were you going with this? Because I have a question about it and a thought.
So it was, I think my thing with it within the series finale, particularly, is that they just needed to get Nick and Jess out of the loft. They needed to close that chapter because it was about them coming into the loft and now it's about them going out of the loft. And it was one of those of literally he's like, it's a prank. And they're like, wait, we're not evicted. And they're nope. So move your shit back in. You still have a lease on this loft.
Yeah, he didn't actually close the lease.
Right. And also they evicted the entire building as a prank, but I get it because what they're really trying to do is just, there you go, it's closed out. And I don't want to give away my final answer, but that's where my final answer lies. What were you thinking, Spiff?
No, it's one of those, I had the similar thought. I was like, well, just move back in. That place is huge and it's rent controlled. They keep talking about it's fine, but also it's a death trap. They talk about all the, oh, they took $100 off my elevator because some of the lines are loose or whatever. And there's
and it plummeted and killed that mailman.
It plummeted and killed the mailman, I think. And there's what? My question is though, and I put this on Facebook, Twitter, I put it on something the other day. I have a question for each of you and just kind of the thought. So, it's a show about Jess and it's meant to be kind of this rom-com of you kind of always know who Jess is angling for and who's supposed to be together. But I actually don't think Nick is the right choice for Jess. And so I'm curious who you guys think Jess's true partner in this show should have been. Coach, why? Because
Coach is the male adorkable. They archetyped him into the male, whatever is stereotypically male. He's bad talking to women. He's all about fitness. He's obtuse. He's stubborn. It's all of the he's the anti-Jess, and therefore they would have been able to both attract and repel each other. And I think that's
interesting because also when he moves away, he is really sentimental.
Yeah. And I think if he was able to be a series regular, she wouldn't have ended up with Nick. A full series regular instead of a few seasons in the middle.
Kara, what do you think?
I'm in the middle of so in my rewatch, I'm in the middle of the Dr. Sam. So I'm like a big fan of Dr. Sam. I'm like, he's like, because he like really likes kids. And like, I think that would have been a good fit for Jess because she has like not aspiration, but like steam, if that makes sense. Like she wants to be a teacher. She has clear direction. Like she knows where she wants to go. And he is clear on that as well. Like what he wants to do vocationally and where he wants to go. And just seems like a better fit than Nick, who like seems like dead weight.
Yes.
Honestly, like Nick's dead weight.
Nick
And partner.
I used to think Nick
and is stubbornly unwilling to grow.
That's my issue with it. When I first watched the entire thing, I thought I loved Nick. I love Nick as an artist. I was like, oh, like a smart bartendery dude. Sign me up. I'm in. You know what I mean? Like, and now that I watched it, I was like, no, there are 1,000 times in which he's given the opportunity to like just be better, do better, and absolutely turns his back. Like it's just like, I absolutely will not do that.
And there are just some parts of him that you're like, get it together.
1,000%. So my answer is
get a bank account.
I think Dr. Sam had they like, as the whole thing plays out, when he comes back from that girl, like they come back and forth. There's something connecting them in ways in which they can, like, he has a restraining order against her at one point, and then like they come back together. And like, I'm a big Dr. Sam person, but I got a lot of every single person. I got 31 answers on my poll, and everyone but one said Nick. And then one person said Ryan Goes in You, which I was like, can we just take a moment for whoever came up with the names of this show, how often they were like, they just did like Goes in You. I was like, brilliant. So good.
Yes. So we are near the end of our hour, and I do want to make sure that we honor our time and our space and our work together. Cara, as you know from 3 previous experiences, we have a final question. Today, the 3 of us are all going to struggle with a little bit just because I feel like it's in the air. But Spiff asks it, and maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong 2 or 3 times in my life before.
I want to hear him, but that can be later.
I don't keep track.
Yes. Don't keep track. We don't need to keep track. Cara, thank you for coming on and talking New Girl in light of the resurrection and all things new, traveling through Jess's new space and new momentum in her life is always fun. But what biblical character, book, theme, verse, phrase are you most reminded of in New Girl?
I'm going to let Arthur answer first, because for the first time I've come on this show unprepared to answer the only question I know I'll be asked.
Okay, that seems unfair, but I'm going to say that the loft is the upper room at Pentecost. This is a show about Eastertide. This is a show about resurrection. And therefore the loft serves its purpose. It is the central place. It is where they go for 40 days, which lasts 7 seasons. But when it is time to go, they just go. And they're able to translate, and they're able to grow, and they're able to go into this world where
That's so funny, because my 2 gut instincts were either the disciples or the new church, because they're kind of a mess, but they're really excited.
Okay.
So those were my 2 like gut instinct kind of answers. So it was funny that you answered the upper room.
Well, we are basically the same person, Cara. So
it's true.
Viewers, I'm working on getting Arthur to be my best friend. He's very resistant.
Well,
I'm not resistant. I'm all for it. We can be
rude about the 2 of you. I'm already mad about what is happening.
I'm not going to
go find 2 new best friends. Okay, I'm going to go with the hat episode, because I intentionally rewatched it, knowing that it was a favorite of Cara's, but also season 1. It's just a good season. It's got the meat of like what you're trying to do, and I feel like it's really it postures us to choose community in the way that I think we are supposed to posture ourselves to choose Christ every time we come to the table.
Mm.
We think that community is just handed to us, that the hard work of community and support and care is freely given. And in that space, both the hat moment and in like the Lord's table, it is. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a choice in it. And that every time someone puts on that hat, every time someone eats the bread in the cup, like doing so in either remembrance of Jesus or doing so in new covenant to each other, is a way in which we are postured or pulled to be postured towards this new covenant of community.
In which we choose each other.
In which we choose each other. It is how, like, you know, they're looking for a TV, right? But that's because they're looking for community, how to serve and be served in both body and spirit communally. Like, right, that TV is a part of where they watch and gather and talk and build trust. And which is why, are you still watching, friends? Get the book.
Oh, yeah. Coming out this October from Chalice Press.
Exactly. But for me, it's always a choice. It is a choice to sit down and watch TV with your roommates, but it is a choice to come to the table. Often we think that it's not something that we are actively doing. It's kind of a little bit rote. It's like, let's just go do it. But it is a choice that I feel excited and required to make, to be a part of community every single time I come to it. And so that choice to put on the hat really felt indicative of that moment, in the way in which I understand my call to the table. So that's that.
None of our first instincts were to be in the Old Testament, which I find interesting because they are kind of a wandering bunch.
Well, so I was going to say that True American was Midrash.
I can't believe we didn't talk about True American.
Oh, True American is Midrash.
We didn't.
Because it has to be situational. It's participatory. You have to understand history, but you can't be stuck to it. And therefore, it's literally a game of communal interpretation, which is what really the rabbinical model is.
All right.
Yeah.
I think we missed an opportunity here. I may have to come back on again, but yes.
Play True
And
American.
also, it's kind of like doing church because the rules are arbitrary, but you have to be a part of the game to understand them. And it's a little bit chaotic.
As I've explained to a couple leaders at my church, you can't change what you're not a part of.
Yeah.
That's the word.
That's the word.
You can't change what you're not a part of. You get, like, with Dr. Sam coming in trying to learn the rules of True American, he's like, this game makes no sense. And yeah, but
the McDermott, who was it that came
Dr.
and totally hopped in and could like play True American.
Also one of my favorite Justice boyfriends.
True American's kind of a test of faith for the loft. Like, if we're going to talk about what's the test of faith for the loft, it's True American.
Well, and what does it mean?
All right, we're going to have a second episode if we're not careful here.
Well, you're right. So we're going to say thank you now, but we need to bring you back for games that exist within television shows that we love, because we could talk about, well, it's not a television show, but Calvin Ball. So
but I mean, True American is how the series ends. They end the entire show playing True American in the future with their kids. So I think Cara is right, is that is the true test of faith.
Are they making their kids drink in that montage?
Yes. I mean, they're drinking like sodas, but yes, they all are. All the kids are drinking. Like, it is a full it's the work of intergenerational church. I don't know.
Well, on that keynote, friends, this has been 2-on-1. We remind you again to go to jeffwonrow.com. Cara, did you know that you can save 15% on your entire stole order by using the code 2on115 at checkout?
I've used your code twice.
Wow.
I have a very fancy stole collection thanks to 2-on-1.
Well, actually, it's thanks to Jeff Wonder Designs. They're celebrating 16 years at least of making ordinary time extraordinary. We will be back again, dear ones. Thank you, Cara, for joining us today. Also, everyone, go to chalicepress.com and pre-order Are You Still Watching, edited by Stephanie Kendall and Arthur Stewart. That's us. And we are your co-hosts. I'm Arthur Stewart.
I'm Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
Oh, I'm the guest, Reverend Cara Gilger.
Yeah, you're the guest, Reverend Cara Gilger, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Get more 2-on-1 at 2on1project.com.